And the military view is we test them in action.
Moreover, the untested little boy would only get one chance to work.
The only way we could know for sure is if we actually test it, but we don't have enough uranium. So we're going to have to look at this and say, our calculations look good, our engineering looks good, but we don't know. And so little boy goes into combat as an untested weapon.
The course of the war, the work of thousands, the expenditure of billions, and the fate of more than 100,000 Japanese soldiers and civilians hung in the balance on the morning of August 6, 1945, as the Enola Gay flew 31,000 feet over Hiroshima. In June of 1945, 155 Manhattan Project scientists signed a petition calling for a demonstration of the atomic bomb over an uninhabited area prior to its use against Japan.
General Groves heard about the petition and ordered that it not be circulated at Los Alamos. Then, to undermine the petition, he conducted a poll of atomic scientists. What do you think of a demonstration? To his chagrin, 83% of the people answering the poll said some sort of demonstration was preferable to bombing civilians. So then Groves saw to it that the petition was bottled up at Oak Ridge until after the bombs fell on Japan.
There was, however, strong support, particularly at the highest levels of government and the military, to use the bomb swiftly against Japanese cities.
There was every incentive to use this weapon to scare the Japanese into surrender before the Russians got in on the post-war settlement. What our military leaders feared was what happened in Korea, where there was a North Japan and a South Japan, and the North Japan was communist and the South Japan was capitalist.
Moreover, the assault on the Japanese mainland, scheduled for November of 1945, would include 1.5 million Allied soldiers. Casualties in the Pacific indicated that losses would be heavy.
By the end of the Second World War, we were so angry at the Japanese. They had started the war, they had fought furiously and brutally. They had slaughtered civilians. We had, by that time, totally destroyed their Air Force. We had totally destroyed their Navy. And yet they wouldn't surrender.
In the spring of 1945, General Groves chose populated Japanese cities as potential targets to demonstrate the bomb's destructive power and end the war as quickly as possible. Once selected, the cities on his short list were off limits to Allied bombing raids. They would be saved in order to be destroyed. The final decision rested with the President and was made on June 1st after a conversation with his Secretary of State, James Burns.
And at one point, Burns said to Truman, "Mr. President, what will you tell the American people at your impeachment in 1946 when they find out that you had a weapon that could have ended the war and saved American lives, and you decided not to use it?" I think that probably was the decisive argument for Truman.
He'd been in World War I, and he knew what it was to fight and die. And I think he was interested in stopping it as quick as he could, and I certainly admired the man for what he did.
Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
At 2:45 a.m. on August 6th, Paul Tibbets lifted the Enola Gay off the runway on Tinian Island.
I thought the airplane will probably go down in history. And I wanted to be sure that, in my mind, there could be no other B-29 that would have the same name. Well, my mother's name, Enola Gay, fit the bill because I knew there could not be two Enola Gays.
On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., the gun model uranium bomb Little Boy dropped from bomb bay doors of the Enola Gay. 43 seconds later, the bomb detonated 1,900 feet above Hiroshima with a force of 12,500 tons of TNT.
I could see little bits of Hiroshima down there, but I couldn't, there was nothing there but black boiling mess. And steam was coming up. There were bubbles, and that's the way that thing looked.
"90% of the city was leveled by the 500-mile-an-hour winds of the blast, which charred victims' skin 2 miles away and incinerated those directly beneath the detonation.
We visited the patients. We visited the railroad platform, which they had lined up all the people who were dying of radiation sickness. Maybe 600 or 800. Nothing to be done. They didn't have anything to work with.
The small boy, I think it was a boy, was bloated, and he couldn't hardly recognize the face at all. They were saying, "Okacha, Okacha, Mizu, Mizu, Mommy, Mommy, water, water." The pitiful, painful cry is something I'll never forget.
The Japanese death toll rose to 130,000 people killed by the blast and ensuing radiation sickness. 3 days later, a second, more powerful plutonium bomb, Fat Man, fell on Nagasaki with similar results. Japan surrendered on August 14, 1945.
Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world, and that God will preserve it always.
The most catastrophic war in human history was over.
I figured out how many of us at Los Alamos really knew all that was going on. And dividing that into the number of casualties, I figure that I'm responsible for 100 or 200 of them. And that's a hard kind of thing to be responsible for. But I've been asked, in view of that calculation, would I do it again? And the answer is yes, because any new weapon I would want to be given first to the United States.
The American atomic weapon monopoly was short-lived. In 1949, the Soviets detonated an atomic bomb. During the 1950s, both superpowers added the hydrogen bomb to their arsenals in an attempt to achieve military superiority. Ultimately, the two would have tens of thousands of weapons in their nuclear arsenals.
Progress cannot be stopped, and we are told to stop progress. I am very much afraid that progress will occur and will occur in a country that is less dedicated to peace than we are.
But Oppenheimer did not agree that the arms race represented progress. His opposition to Edward Teller's hydrogen bomb project and questions about his communist sympathies led to the revoking of his security clearance at a government hearing in 1954. Teller testified against his former chief.
He should not have testified against Oppenheimer. I think that the whole proceeding against Oppenheimer was a terrible mistake on the part of the United States government, and I felt very upset by it, as I think many scientists did, and I felt that any scientist who supported this was more or less doing exactly the wrong thing.
Oppenheimer's career had been brought to an end. But the debate over his and the Manhattan Project's contribution to history was just beginning.
If you graph human deaths from war across the last 200 years, you will see an exponential increase up to 1945, at which point the line on the graph drops to about 1 million a year and stays there for the rest of the century. Clearly, there was a radical break in international affairs in 1945. And I think that break has to be attributed to this discovery that scientists made, working peacefully in their laboratories, trying to understand how the world really works, rather than how we would wish that it worked.
The question of the Manhattan Project's legacy, whether the atom